Well, we're going to keep Hakim and Brian on Skype, and we're going to invite the other speakers that are local here to join me on stage. This is truly a global panel. Thank you guys all very much. And so, Brian, I'm going to go to you just for a first question, because just as you were starting to talk about the personal connections there and building of the community, you broke up a little bit for us. And I know in our pre-call we had a really good dialogue about that, both you and Hakim, about how you've built these global alliances and networks. And so could you just drill into that a little bit more? Brian, are you there?
Yeah, I am again now, yes. So just repeat the last part of your question. I got almost to the end of your question, not all of it, sorry.
It was just to expand a little bit more on how you built this, network of 200, people and community and, countries coming together, and the alliances, both you and Hakim, I guess, and you mentioned about doing that by one. And so just talk a little bit about breaking down those silos and building those personal relationships. Are we not able to?
Kathleen, if you want, I can pick up on how we've done it with the North of England.
Oh, okay, go ahead, Hakim.
So what we've been looking at is trying to find reciprocal partners globally that have either got something that we need, or they've got something, we've got something they need, or vice versa. The way we've been putting ourselves forward is as a clinical test bed, a research test bed, to get validation within the North's 15 million clinical environment. We've got a particular strength in medical technologies and evaluating medical technologies. So we've been making sort of strategic contact with clusters in Singapore, within Israel and others, where we've established this reciprocal partnership where we provide a soft landing pad for companies coming in to the North of England in terms of identifying key opinion leaders or infrastructure or biobanks they might need to get access to. But equally, they then offer themselves up as a soft landing pad for UK companies that have tested and validated in the NHS and need to start thinking beyond the UK. But fundamentally, to Brian's earlier point, they're built on trust. They're built on lots of air miles in terms of making sure so much can be done by Skype, going there, meeting companies and hand-holding them back into the ecosystem. We started with Singapore about 3 years ago. And we're now developing that model with other countries.
Thank you. That seems like a lot of work to do that, to be reaching out. And I think that's a very key point. I think, Brian, Randy, you were saying about how you've got to be exploring a global mindset, but like staying local. And so again, I see this quite often. And this is, Luke and I sort of talked a little bit about this during the break, is somebody's got to take an initiative and just put a stake in the ground and say, we're going to do something. He set a date of May. We'll tell you after what his big plan is, and then start to work towards it and start to do, some of this global outreach. And so I'm just going to open it up to the folks that are local here as to what are you seeing us doing? Who are we reaching out to globally, and whom do we need to be reaching out to outside of Edmonton or Alberta?
Kate, can you hear me? Great. I usually start local, and so just staying connected in the community, I get reach outs. I actually get more reach outs now than I can respond to, but I respond to a number, right? And over the time, I've been in the United States many times. I moved to San Diego for a while. I've traveled with Mel Wong and Bio Alberta, and so you make these connections, and then you just reinforce them. It's really getting in touch with people that care about what you're working on. And that's why he's saying, too, like, we have to be careful to get too caught up in the Alberta mindset, because it's not a very large market, even though there's great things here. It's a great community, so building here is important. But just connecting with those people that actually are looking for those solutions is hugely important.
I think for us, because we're a very global consulting practice, we do leverage a lot of the work we do in other jurisdictions, whether that, and particularly in healthcare. So our U.S. firm is doing some really innovative work in healthcare, in AI, blockchain. And so what we're doing is we're bringing those lessons learned and those SMEs, or subject matter experts, leveraging them and bringing them on some of the projects we're doing here locally. So we work with, the local PCNs and some of the healthcare stakeholders here. And what we've really realized is that we need an alliance amongst stakeholders. And so we're building some of those capacities here locally, getting our folks trained in specific areas, and bringing that global expertise and leveraging our local capacity in order to deliver and provide that value to our clients. And that's proved to be a very successful outcome for us.
Excellent. And I'll ask you, Dornoosh, as you answer, you went to get some funding globally. So what were the resources? Were there resources available here in Alberta for you? Why did you, get money globally? It's super impressive, certainly global. 5 hospitals, you said, 4 countries. I mean, congratulations to you on that. That's amazing. And it's a really great model for everybody to look at. So I think it's the right thing to do, obviously. You can't just get it here. But did you find the support here?
Actually, the honest answer is that I would not be the best person to answer this question because I didn't really search for support in here. I used to live in Singapore for 10 years. I did all my graduate degrees in Singapore. Yeah. So I was very familiar with that ecosystem. So when I wanted to start Medo, I right away went back to Singapore. Yeah. But I really need to mention that Alberta government have done a great job connecting with us while we were in Singapore, and help us come back home. Yeah. In that sense, my experience has been very positive. So a little bit different from what I hear usually. Yeah.
There's great resources globally, especially for entrepreneurs through the consulates and the embassies and whatnot that exist out there.
They're doing a great job.
Yes. All right, we're going to go to some of the Slido questions. So this might be for Hakim, Brian, and Randy a little bit. What advice do you give for getting people in silos to work together? How did you break down some of those barriers? Anybody can start.
I'm happy to start. I think for us, it was starting to find the common ground and understanding where they were beginning to share the same needs and requirements. But I'm sure Brian will probably say something similar. Finding some sort of quick win that demonstrates the value of the alliance has been hugely powerful for us. We were very fortunate to have some of those quick wins happen quickly. Often we talk about quick wins, but they don't happen that quickly when you're building alliances. And that's enabled people who historically wouldn't have worked with each other to realize that they can be more than the sum of their parts.
And maybe I could just jump in and add and support what Hakim has said. The other suggestion I would make is we discovered that you get people's attention when you lead with the need. So you identify a need in a particular region. It may be a government procurement, it may be something like that. And then you get people to gather around that. And what you do is you give access to people, particularly industry has a real problem in many countries. And really, knowing what's coming down, being able to, secondly, influence what's going to be in the tender, because often people who do procurement don't know what's out in the marketplace. So we spend a lot of our time educating procurers, because if they just write the same tender that they wrote 3 years ago, they're going to buy the same things they bought 3 years ago. So where's the innovation in that? So we lead with the need. So every one of our meetings, and I must say this, I don't want to offend anyone, but I've never been to an AA meeting in Alcoholics Anonymous, but I understand that you know, stand up and say, my name is Brian, I'm an alcoholic. In our case, what we say is you have to stand up and say, my name is whatever, I have the following needs. And it is amazing how many people then respond to that need, either with existing solutions or willing to work even with their competitors to create a solution. So you've got to be practical, you've got to be real. Coffee shops There are too many of them. So you need to be real and deliver. And Hakim's right. You've got to show some, and he's right as well. It's very difficult to get quick wins. You have to define quick. But in some cases, at least, you can be seen to have made a difference, which then, in our case, translates across all of our ecosystems. So we can do a roadshow around our ecosystems with some of the success stories. And for example, we have people yesterday in France, people next week in Poland, talking about our success with the optimization solution. So, you know, these are real practical needs that people have. So don't try to be, well, my advice would be, don't try to be too highbrow about this. Deal with the need and you'll get somewhere.
Thank you very much. You're breaking up a little bit there, but I think we got the gist of that. I was going to just go to some of these Slido questions again, because there's a few of them up there. I want to ask this for Meadow, just because I'm curious. Has the technology for Meadow been piloted? Is that it's in pilot stage right now?
Yes, we have recently started pilots in 2 hospitals in Singapore.
Okay.
And looking forward to, we are going to work on a project for native community with the help of Health City. And hospital in Edmonton going to soon start pilots as well.
Yeah. It's so important to be able to have the rest of the globe look into and see what's happening here, and a great example of what you're doing to shine the light onto. So you have to work with us as well here, but then make sure you're working globally.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Let's see. Do you find, I'll just open this up, I guess. Do you find cultural resistance in the clinical community in collaborating across other jurisdictions, and how do you address that?
It's for me.
Go ahead.
Well, I worked on the same problem, wearing 2 different kind of hats. Well, I started working on exactly the same problem as an engineer, as a data scientist. And then I started my work in radiology department of University of Alberta, trying to solve, again, that problem. But I felt, oh my God, it's a total different world, different culture. Even the problems are very different. When the viewpoint changes, the actual problem actually changes. Yeah. So I think it's a huge gap between how entrepreneurs and even startup companies trying to solve the gaps that exist in medical communities and what medical people, physicians, clinicians feel is a real problem. Mm-hmm. And because of that, it is extremely important to have them drive the innovation. And it's extremely important that the clinicians should be the ones who are leading the change. So I truly believe if there's a health tech startup, there should be physicians and clinicians in the funding committee or in executive positions or in VPs and management roles. And unfortunately, I think this is still a little bit missing when you look at the whole ecosystem. Still, that gap is huge. People need to get together. For us, we were lucky. We were kind of an insider, so people were not really resisting because they say, okay, if there are 2 senior radiologists who are designing the software, testing it, promoting it to us, then they were trusting us easier than other companies, I would say.
It certainly is all about relationships, isn't
Absolutely.
it? Yeah,
Absolutely.
Building them and fostering them.
Absolutely.
And that takes us to go out and be active about that versus waiting for them to come to us. Badeia, I'm going to ask you then a little bit, building off of that, just about then, what tactical steps here, what do you think that we should be doing here in YEG, in Edmonton? Yeah.
Well, that's a pretty loaded question, just given all the feedback that we've received this morning and what we're seeing globally. I think a few things, and forums such as this do help, and I really do believe that Health City is that innovative disruptor within our ecosystem. They have partnerships within the Ministry of Health, and they have partnerships with AHS, PCNs, and kind of the key stakeholders across the ecosystem. I think some key takeaways that we could be doing right away is that really leveraging the private-public sector alliances and looking at things differently. Typically, as you know, in the healthcare space, we kind of always come up with the same issues. But when you have someone who comes in with a fresh set of eyes or a fresh lens, someone who's not from the health space, they come at it more of an opportunistic way to find a solution to a problem. And so some key things and some takeaways we can be doing right now is figuring out what those gaps are and closing the gap. So instead of, we heard about silos, a lot of, our neighbor down the street is probably doing the same thing and we just don't know it. And so we're duplicating efforts, unfortunately. I think we need to be very transparent and talk about some of the things that we're working on and being more open about the projects that we're working on, putting our hats aside and our personal interests aside when it comes to healthcare and working together as a team. And I think we can start doing that right now, and you're starting to see it more so in Alberta. The new clinical information system that's supposed to be, being implemented at least at the first site in November here. You're starting to see more stakeholder consultations, feedback. So something we can do right now is just, I think, being more open and transparent, where traditionally in the healthcare sense, we aren't. Clinicians are holding their data very close to their chest. No one's willing to share ideas. And so we're telling physicians and clinical stakeholders to move away from the traditional way of thinking and shifting care and shifting the mindset and shifting the delivery of care, where, it's been very open. The Minister of Health, Honorable Sarah Hoffman in 2016 mentioned, we're going to be shifting care closer to community. So how do we bring care closer to home? And those alliances are important in order for us to do that and to realize that rather ambitious, but I think realistic goal.
Yeah. And as you talk, I just want to go back and maybe weave it into like that global mindset piece. And so, I'm part of bringing Singularity University here. Yeah. That's definitely global mindset. It's where we've introduced Singularity to a lot of people in the Edmonton area that are not aware of, So how can we actually, do some things that would continue to build that global mindset? And you can build off what Badeia said too. But
well, I wanted to also hit on the cultural point, because the whole question, I think you're talking to it. There's a few different cultures we actually have to get ourselves into. One is actually the cultural dynamic within the health system. And what you notice within the health system, so because we're active in the United States, we're active in Canada, we have some really interesting partners in Asia. I have a really close friend, Boston, who's connecting us with Ghana, and I've been to Europe recently. So I'm dabbling a little bit in certain places and more involved in others. I can tell you for sure that working in developing nations versus first world nations is massively different culturally. The problems are all kind of the same. And so it's been really fascinating for me to get to know people in different parts of the world and how we're actually working at these problems. And so then we have the culture of the cultures of different nations. And selfishly, we as Canadians and maybe other places have only one language. And greatly, many people are very open to speaking English with us. And so we're able to bridge those divides, and that has been incredible. So there's certain challenges that we face in working in these other places. So we stay hyper-focused on serving those problems with people that can execute on them quickly. This is one of the most amazing things to me about living and being in a first world nation, is that we actually have gotten ourselves into a place where it's hard to innovate. And we're working at trying to figure out how do we change that and make it better, because fundamentally the problems are the same. The expectation for companies like mine in Canada, in the United States and elsewhere is at a very high standard. And so they set the standards, but that also means that the time to innovate, the cost to innovate, and the processes to innovate are far heavier. And so we're actually seeing developing nations starting to be preeminent in the adoption of new technologies. And so guess what we do? We go to those places where we can innovate. And in today's innovation is not about how to innovate on the device. It's how to innovate with the data sets and accessing those things in a timely fashion. And I have to tell you, we must fix that here. That is why I am here, is to help make that message, because this community can thrive. But if we do not deal with this seriously, and we do not make the places to innovate more accessible, we will not have quality companies. And there's lots in this room. So that's a message for all of us, from my humble opinion, and I will continue to travel and represent this community in that way.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay.
So, Catherine Sweets here. What role does or can the philanthropic sector play in Northern England and other jurisdictions?
Yeah, what role does the philanthropic sector play in Northern England and other jurisdictions? Hakim?
So the philanthropic scene in the UK can be really divided into two fronts. First, the one that is channeled through the research charities, and secondly, the sort of out of pocket from a high net worth who may fund a particular disease area with a particular passion for that area, normally driven by family reasons. I just want to pick up on the first piece I said around the research charities, because something that's been a common theme throughout everything that everyone's said so far this morning is really understanding the problem. And more often than not, we talk about the health system understanding the problem, or we talk about the clinician or the entrepreneur or the company, and very rarely do we get to the level of the patient understanding the problem. I was very privileged to be at a meeting organized by a number of dementia and age-related research charity. Ever expect to get a silver bullet to cure their Alzheimer's, but they would love it if someone could start to help with the night tremors, with the dehydration, and all of the other symptoms associated. And until you get to that point of having something like philanthropic bodies like Cancer Research UK, like British Heart Foundation, who are able to really articulate the patient need, I think it's then when you combine that with the clinical problem and really refining the clinical unmet need that you can really start to innovate by bringing in the public-private sector bodies, by breaking rules around how that innovation happens, whether it's the use of data or AI or any other technology. And the role that the and patient requirement, as well as actually being a fairly significant funder of some of those solutions.
Thank you. Do you want to ask another question?
Have we got this? There we go. Actually, there's a couple of questions maybe we could combine for Dornoosh, if that's okay. I'll read them both out. Dornoosh, you have an amazing concept. What is your number one hurdle to overcome? Are you seeking help? And if so, explain that. And does medo.ai have Health Canada approval? And there's just a comment. AI technologies NHC approval is a challenging process. Can you speak to where you are in the process? There's 4 questions there. Can you give us a bit of a summary?
They are all very related, because I believe the first hurdle is actually the approvals, which we do not have. We are a very young company. Our product is in the very final stages of development. We are running pilots and clinical trials, and we would be only able to apply after the results of the trials are out. But that's the first hurdle. Having said that, based on what we're seeing in pilots, we're very hopeful, and we are looking into applying for FDA in April. So we're not very far from that. And we have started with FDA, but Health Canada soon after that.
Great.
Can I have this mic back? Thank you. I think we just have one more at the bottom here, Joanne. Badeia.
What type of funding is Deloitte providing for young health entrepreneurs?
Well, thanks for putting me on the spot.
It was them, they did it.
Sorry?
It was they did it, I didn't do it.
I think we're quite involved in our healthcare landscape. So, I'll kind of, one particular example some of you might have already heard of is this AI Alberta business case that, the AI ecosystem has come together and is working towards, really moving efforts and building and creating a vision of making Alberta a billion-dollar AI ecosystem by 2025. Although this is a very ambitious goal, Deloitte is playing, a role to facilitate, help the development of this business plan and working with startups, the tech community to help scale or bring commercialization to some of the products and services that we're seeing here in the Alberta ecosystem. I know Deloitte does a lot of work globally in funding. We have a rigorous process. So if there is an idea, that goes to our leadership team, and we do a lot of rigorous internal investigation, exploration. And, if the alignment fits, that's an opportunity that we explore. I know in the U.S. they're much more nimble, and our U.S. firm does a lot more work in that space than we do here in Canada, particularly because I think Canada is very is now getting on the momentum train in the tech startup community, where the U.S. is far more exceeding where we are today. I can't kind of disclose who we've invested in and what we're doing, but Deloitte is a key player and highly invested in seeing Alberta companies grow and to really bring that retention of talent and working on some of those competencies for them to remain here in Alberta. Deloitte has a group called Omnia where it's literally all analytics, AI, dashboards, ML, competencies, and what we're doing is we're bringing that here at Alberta. Although it is kind of based in Toronto, we're building a team in Alberta to respond to the needs of the community and of the ecosystem. So, if there are ideas or if you'd like to approach me afterwards, happy to continue the conversation to see how we could work together.
Great. Generally, some of the things that I see is the lack of, or the need for urgency to sort of going to the point of being able to solve these problems, look at them, start with the problem first. But in the Valley, and again, I'm sorry that I keep referencing it, but I've lived there for 20 years. We wake up with this sense of urgency every single day, and it's incredibly exhausting, but it's incredibly exhilarating at the same time. And it is what is driving that ecosystem, is because everybody is very competitive in what they're trying to achieve, but they're also incredibly collaborative, and they're very open. And so they're meeting with, there's 100,000 meetups every night there. There's small groups. There's, every kind of women in data, big data group to sort of, larger AI to different industries, to executive networks and different alliances. And there's just so much that's happening there. And when I've been to Toronto recently, I try to call in some colleagues to go out, and they're all busy because they're all going to TechTO and they're going to like this event, and there's like, they've started to really replicate that there. So kind of going back to, what you need to do to get out and to be building those connections outside of your local ecosystem, I think is so incredibly important. And doing things that are coming into market, I personally see an opportunity for more investment in people to be able to, send your employees to different conferences globally or locally, even across Canada. There's lots of opportunity for collaboration amongst the Canadian provinces. For whatever reason, the rest of the world looks to Canada as like one place. So they're all like, well, Edmonton, are you talking to Montreal? Because they were just here last week. So, and we're not going to just all do the same thing, but yet there's lots of opportunities for more of that to happen and to learn from each other. Again, I ramble a little bit. So any other questions?
There is one. We're just about out of time,
Yes.
but it is a question for Badeia. Could you share an example of the work with primary care or PCN, the primary care network you mentioned? What key elements led to successful or sustainable innovation implementation?
Absolutely. So I can't disclose particularly which PCN we worked with, but I will share some key lessons learned. So as most of you know, there's 42 different PCNs across Alberta. And the unique thing about the PCNs is primary care is the first door to entry to our healthcare system. Someone has a cough, an ache, whatever, a headache, whatever the case may be, they typically call their GP or they book an appointment at a primary care facility. And then depending on that, they get referred to a specialist, they go to a hospital, and so forth. Although these 42 PCNs kind of have the same mandate and work here in Alberta, they work in a very siloed environment. So within one PCN, for example, you could have 30 plus clinics that services one geographic location. And so in those 32 clinics, they all work off of a different electronic medical record system. And within that, there's no connectivity between those systems, and there's no continuity of care of a patient's journey when they walk in. So for example, if I was sick and I went to one PCN clinic, and then I got referred to another one, my information actually doesn't link back, even though you're within one PCN. So as you can see, there's a lot of complex challenges. And so very interesting because of the complexity and because of the culture and because of so many different nuances that we might not appreciate, we kind of came in to do an overall assessment. One, in terms of building a roadmap and a strategy on how to adopt technology such as wearables, leveraging telehealth, and improving the electronic medical record implementation process, which a lot of the PCNs in Alberta and even in our acute care environment face today. And so we provided that that different lens on how you can improve that. And what we're seeing now is PCNs are being more innovative, and they're working with AHS and they're working with the ministry to see how we can do that. How do we adopt mobile health technology? How can we empower and engage patients? And you're starting to see a bit of a cultural shift. We're lacking for sure, and there's a lot of work that we need to do. But we're providing that lens, and we're leveraging some of our global experience, and we brought that to the project that we did here. And from an electronic medical record, the implementation process that we did, we found that it wasn't the technology similar to what I talked about today. We found that there was the people side was being neglected, so not enough and proper training or adequate training, not really reaching out to kind of the stakeholders, and just making sure that you're looking at it from a holistic point of view, not just the technology point of view.
Thank you. I want to thank all of our panelists. Thank you, Hakim, for joining us. Your global perspectives are key, and it's no doubt after this morning we have a huge opportunity here in Edmonton and through Health City. I'm super excited to see the work that you guys are going to do to help make sure Edmonton is on the global map. So thank you.